When the Conduit was released, it was praised for its impressive visuals and controls, but criticized for its repetitive gameplay and unoriginal storyline. The game was a minor commercial success, selling 150,000 units during its first week. High Voltage Software began work on a sequel, with the goal to make it a bigger and better experience. Conduit 2 would have more levels, a larger scope, new weapons, new features like split-screen multiplayer, and an expanded online multiplayer. I was hyped for Conduit 2. I played the hell out of the first game and got excited when I learned a sequel was on the way. No joke, Conduit 2 was the first game I ever pre-ordered. I know pre-orders are considered the devil's work, but I was 14 and wanted to play the sequel as soon as possible. Conduit 2 released in 2011, a turning point in the Wii's life cycle. There were fewer first-party and third-party titles being released, as consumers' interest in the system had started waning. Nintendo themselves shifted their focus away from the Wii and towards their next system, the Wii U. As for Conduit 2, the game's development was rushed. In a post-mortem written by Chief Creative Officer Eric Nofzinger, he elaborated on the highs and lows of the project. For Conduit 2, they hired an external writer to craft a story. What he wrote was a massive epic too big in scope. With the deadline looming, the story went through a massive edit and rewrite, scaling back the initial vision. Additionally, Conduit 2 wasn't prioritized like it should have been. Only a small team was working on the game while the rest of High Voltage was busy with projects like The Grinder, the unmade Left 4 Dead inspired shooter. As a result, the game was rushed to meet its deadline. Conduit 2 released on April 19, 2011, the same day as games like Mortal Kombat and Portal 2. While some critics felt it was an improvement, others felt it was a run-of-the-mill sequel. As someone who has a lot of nostalgia for both Conduit games, especially this one, I was curious to see how Conduit 2 holds up. Is it an improvement over the original, or is it a half-baked sequel?
Goodbye, Mr. Ford. I'll return to pry the ASC from your cold, dead hands. You still don't understand, do you, Mr. Ford?
As long as Adams is still alive, he's a threat. I'm the only one who can stop him.
Picking up immediately from the Conduit, Michael Ford and Prometheus escape the Trust HQ via a portal and end up on an oil rig in the middle of the Bermuda Triangle. The two learn John Adams is hung for progenitors, an ancient alien race secretly pulling the strings of human society. Adams wants to find the surviving progenitors, kill them, and absorb their power. Ford and Prometheus find their way to Atlantis. The Lost Empire is an alien spacecraft that houses an ancient warrior named Andromeda and a new suit of armor for Ford to wear. After awakening Andromeda, the two begin their quest to find the other progenitors before Adams can.
Sword Destroyer, you have returned to try your powers against me once again. What audacity!
Look, I'm not here to fight. I'm here to warn you. Adam, the Pathfinder. He's coming here to kill you.
How dare you!
Conduit 2 eschews the original straight and serious tone in favor of something fun and pulpy. It's still heavy on the conspiracy theories, but the world is more fleshed out, as are the characters. Michael Ford is no longer a boring stick. Now, he's a T-rated Duke Nukem. Literally. John St. John voices Michael and gives the character more personality than he ever had before. He's cocky, sarcastic, and loves his one-liners.
Well, the Leviathan sure helped that guy get off the rig.
The relationship between him and Prometheus is also different. It's less 20 questions with Kevin Sorbo, and more like Tony and Jarvis from Iron Man. Prometheus relays information to Michael, while Michael kills with style. The change in tone is night and day. If the Conduit was the X-Files meets the Bourne Identity, then Conduit 2 is the X-Files meets a Roger Corman B-movie. This is the Deathstalker II of video game sequels. The campier tale nowhere near as serious as the original. Side note, go watch Deathstalker II. It's amazing.
I'll have my revenge, and Deathstalker II.
My point is, Conduit 2 has personality, something the first game didn't. The characters are likable, The world building is delightfully absurd, and its scope is bigger. Conduit 2 takes Michael out of Washington, D.C., and into the valleys of China and snowy mountains of Siberia. After nothing but repetitive corridors and streets, the change in locations is welcome. Despite my praises, the story suffers from one big problem: pacing. Conduit 2's story is rushed. The strong first half gives way to an underwhelming second half that rushes through things faster than a speeding bullet. There's no build-up or anything. 1 minute you're in South America, the next you're back in Atlantis fighting John Adams. If there's any indicator Conduit 2 is pushed out the door, it's this game's pacing. The campaign needed at least one more level to bridge the gap and create some build-up before the final boss. However, the ending is one of the most absurd cliffhangers in the history of cliffhangers and almost redeems Conduit 2's story.
Nice trick, boy. But how long do you think you can survive here?
Long enough to kick your ass!
After defeating John Adams, the ASE emits a beacon that awakens the ship in the far reaches of space. A portal opens and out walk Space Marines George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. No, I'm not joking.
What the? You're
Here to help.
Holy shit!
It's such a bonkers ending, but given how crazy Conduit 2 is, it works. Sadly, we've yet to see a Conduit 3 that follows up on this gonzo cliffhanger, and it seems unlikely we ever will.
I think this is the right address.
According to my scans, we are in D.C., in one of Adam's Cold War bunkers beneath the city.
Conduit 2's gameplay is leaps and bounds better than its predecessor. It fixes all the original's design problems while polishing up everything else. The result is a more fleshed out experience that, while not without its problems, does show they made an active effort to improve the gameplay. Conduit 2 retains the original's excellent controls and customization. This time, players have the option to use Wii Motion Plus for better aiming, or the classic controller for dual analog sticks. While classic controller support is nice, nothing beats the Wii Remote and Nunchuck. Plus, the inclusion of Wii Motion Plus means it's easier to pull off headshots. As mentioned, the gameplay has been overhauled. In the Conduit, you spend the campaign gunning down human and drudge forces. It wasn't bad, just predictable. Conduit 2 makes an active effort to mix things up by reimagining old weapons and enemies, and adding new guns and boss fights. Every gun from the first game is back and better than before. All weapons now have iron sights or an alternate firing mode that changes their function. For example, the Scar Assault Rifle is fully automatic when you hip fire, but when you aim down sights, it switches to single shot. The TPC launcher fires regular explosive canisters or proximity mines that can be remotely detonated.
I always knew my video game skills would come in handy someday.
In addition to resurrecting old guns, Conduit 2 introduces some new toys. These include a sniper rifle that can shoot through walls and a deployable turret. My personal favorite is the Arc Eclipse rifle because of its unique function. Holding the fire button makes Ford invisible, albeit at the cost of freezing the gun. Firing rounds cools off the gun, but now risk overheating instead of freezing. It's a small detail, but it affects how you use the weapon during combat. Enemies have also received some adjustments. In the first game, soldiers felt like combat dummies. In the sequel, they use different tactics like tipping over objects for cover or evading thrown grenades. You also fight different ranks of trust. Lightly armored troops hide behind cover, while heavily armored troops come charging at Ford with a shotgun in hand. The Drudge behaves about the same as before. What's different this time is their weapons. The strike rifle from the first game functions more like a sniper rifle. The Hive Cannon now lets you tag targets before peppering them with a barrage of bug bullets. Additionally, Conduit 2 downplays how often you destroy spawners. Outside of one section in the DC stage, destroying X-Sacks and conduits is kept to a minimum, which is good because it keeps the action going instead of grinding it to a halt. In addition to the returning Trust and Drudge forces, several new enemies join the fray, many of which are exclusive to certain levels. In the China level, you'll encounter Jade Warrior statues that are slow but take a lot of punishment. In Siberia, you'll fend off cyborgs and robot dogs. You'll also have to avoid security cameras that will summon reinforcements if you're spotted. Conduit 2 adds boss fights. They're fast, frantic, and more importantly, fun. As you weaken them, they get more aggressive and change up their attack patterns to catch you off guard. Considering Conduit 2 came out during an era where shooters were trying to be like Call of Duty, it's refreshing to see such old school flourishes in a modern day shooter. Returning from the Conduit is the ASE. Unfortunately, it functions about the same as it did in the original. It's mainly used to unlock doors and scan terminals. However, each level is packed with collectibles to find, so it at least gives you a reason to keep the thing out beyond opening doors. Atlantis acts as a hub in between levels. Here, you can replay missions or visit unlocked side areas. There's also an arsenal replicator that lets you create your own loadout. Conduit 2 features a stronger integration of single player and multiplayer. An in-game store lets players purchase gear, characters, and more using credits obtained from single player or multiplayer. With the Arsenal Replicator, you can create your own custom Ford using the unlocked weapons and upgrades. The inclusion of loadouts gives you a lot of freedom with how to customize your character. You may have distinct loadouts for single player and multiplayer, or a shared loadout for both. Multiplayer has been expanded. A split screen option for up to 4 players is now available, as well as a survival mode called Invasion. In Invasion, you and 3 others hold out against increasingly difficult waves of enemies. Money is earned from killing enemies or locating hidden caches. Online multiplayer was also improved. Taking a cue from shooters of the time, they implemented an XP system, the ability to revive teammates, and added more modes. I remember spending quite a bit of time with the online multiplayer back in 2013-2014. It was a lot more active than the Conduit's online, and a lot less glitchy. They released a patch to curb hacker intrusions that plagued the first game, and overall, it was a fun, competitive experience. While Conduit 2 rights a lot of wrongs, it does have its issues. The ASE is still underutilized. Even though there's more items to scan, it still feels like a high-tech skeleton key. The AI is an improvement, but there are several times where they can be inept, doing things like standing out in the open or ducking right on top of an exploding grenade.
Michael, a hostile vessel is approaching from behind us.
Oh yeah? I hate tailgaters.
Conduit 2 looks as good as the first, but where it excels is its art direction. The level design and characters are fantastic and way more pleasing to the eye than the first game's brown and gray cityscapes. In Atlantis, for instance, there's a gigantic graveyard of planes and ships, alluding to the fact that you're in the middle of the Bermuda Triangle. Returned from the Conduit is the excellent weapon animations. The way Ford pumps a shotgun after every shot is incredibly satisfying. And speaking of satisfying, popping headshots is
nice.
However, there are glitches. I ran into a few frame rate dips during the campaign, and a couple of times, enemies spawned in as stiff mannequins, with very little animation to them. Also, the graphics take a nosedive during split screen. The visuals go from crisp and clear to ugly and murky. Sound is great. The voice acting is campy but enjoyable, and the sound effects are loud and punchy. The music is a lot more interesting, utilizing various themes that reflect not just the current situation, but the levels themselves.
Whoa, deja vu. Wasn't I just in this hallway?
Sometimes building planners save time and money by repeating the same structure multiple times. Just like in your Earth video games.
Conduit 2 is an underrated sequel. The first game felt like a tech demo, but the sequel feels like a proper game. It's a case example of a developer listening to feedback and using it to create a more enjoyable, more polished experience. What sets this game apart from the first is its personality. The Conduit felt like a product of the 24 Jason Bourne era, where a man is on the run and needs to find the truth. In stark contrast, Conduit 2 has you going around the world, fighting weird monsters and killing enemies with cool guns. All the while, John St. John dishes out cheesy one-liners. The gameplay improves upon its predecessor in many ways. The gunplay is more polished, the enemies aren't dumb bullet sponges, and the wide arsenal gives you a lot to toy with. The levels feel more alive and less empty because of various little moments sprinkled throughout. One moment, you're gunning down bad guys. The next, you watch a helicopter get eaten out of the sky by a giant serpent. It's small potatoes, yes, but these potatoes add flavor to the moment-to-moment action, something the Conduit had in spades. The biggest shortcoming is its rushed mess of a story. The characters are better, and the universe is grander, but it fizzles out too quickly. It's a shame because everything else surrounding Conduit 2 is so good, yet the story tries to derail everything the game has going for it. Both Conduit games might not be masterpieces, but they were an attempt to cater to an audience most third-party developers neglected. Not to mention, they pushed Wii's hardware in ways people thought weren't possible. What they lack in polish, they make up for with their ambition. In Conduit 2's case, it's an instance where the sequel is vastly superior to the original. Conduit 2 gets a 7 out of 10.